On this week's show, we sit down and talk with Georgia Southern Athletics Director Tom Kleinlein about how the football season went and what he expects in the future. And we also had a chance to sit down with Georgia Southern head football coach Tyson Summers, who discusses the recent vacancy at offensive coordinator, among other things. All that and men's and women's basketball updates as well, as we welcome you inside the Eagles Nest.
Eagles came to fight, it's their blue, white. Eagles came to fight, it's their
Welcome.
Almost Saturday.
What am I doing here? 3, 2, 1. And welcome inside the Eagles Nest. I'm your host, Josh Aubrey, being joined by Mike Anthony, sports editor and Georgia Southern beat writer for the Statesboro Herald. And Mike, it's been a wild week, I would imagine, for both of us. The Georgia Southern Eagles in the game with Troy on a good note. Congratulations to the seniors. They pull out a 28-24 victory. And then we all sit and wait for the smoke to clear and see whether or not head coach Tyson Summers was gone. And then once the announcement came that he was sticking around, we waited to see what staff changes were going to be made. And then we got that notice there on Sunday that both co-offensive coordinators, David Dean and Rance Gillespie, were gone. Those were the only announced changes. Then we had a chance to speak with Tom Kleinlein, and we also had a chance to speak with Georgia Southern head coach Tyson Summers on Monday. And at this point, we're just basically waiting now to hear the announcement of who the new offensive coordinator will be and who else comes on board and if he brings somebody else. A wild week. Your thoughts on the past few days and what you've gotten from the last few days?
Well, we've gone through so much the last few years with Georgia Southern making the move up to FBS, tons of new things each season. Yet another new one, maybe not so much on the positive side this year. You've got the end of the season with no bowl in sight, a 5-7 record, not enough to get it done, advance to a bowl game for a second consecutive year. But now something new, that coaching carousel. The season's over for a lot of teams around the country, but it's over on the field, not so much off the field. As soon as you create a vacancy, that means that there's going to be tons of resumes floating into town, maybe some more floating away from town, and really hard to keep up. There's no shortage of rumors out there, but I do think that from talking to Coach Summers, he's willing to maybe take his time, do his due diligence. He knows that getting an offensive coordinator who can run maybe more of a traditional Georgia Southern type offense could be the key to turning this thing around sooner rather than later.
Well, we had a chance to meet with Coach Summers along with other members of the media, talk about what's next for Georgia Southern.
David Dean and Rance Gillespie are fantastic football coaches, and they do a terrific job. And I think you certainly see that with the play of the quarterbacks and the receivers this year. But I just felt like from a culture standpoint, where we're wanting to be and where we're wanting to go, and particularly for here at Georgia Southern, they need to go in a different direction. And it's hard, and it's not something that I would sit there and point blame at them. I point at myself, to start with, and it's been tough. And again, I would sit there and tell you that anything to do with those two guys as coaches, as people, as husbands, they both they've done a fantastic job in a million different avenues. But it is a hard part of it. It is a business, and it can be a tough business at times, unfortunately.
Coach, when you hired the two of them, they didn't exactly have backgrounds in running forms of the option. Were you hopeful that they would catch on and it just didn't happen, or what?
Yes, sir. And again, I think that as going through the process and looking at, probably where I was a year ago, there are a lot of things that I certainly feel like I've made mistakes with, and certainly things that I feel like moving forward, and as I grow as a head football coach, and certainly here, that I've got to be able to own up to those things. I've got to be able to go through an analyzation process with that, and be able to see it and be able to move forward. And yes, sir, that would be accurate.
As far as who you're going to hire, is it going to be 1, 2 guys? Is it going to be a co thing?
No, the intent is for there to be one individual. and the intent is to be able to certainly find somebody that's background comes back to being able to rush the ball. It doesn't mean that we will exclusively stop throwing the ball or anything like that, but we're trying to find a guy that can do that, and then be able to have somebody with a similar background come in as an assistant coach to be able to help them.
Is there a particular kind of offense that you're looking to run?
Well,
would it be an option? Would it be just running the ball, period, more than you throw?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to get into saying that something's got to be this or something's got to be that, but I certainly think that as we move forward, we're looking for guys that fit the culture of what we have here at Georgia Southern, fit the personnel of what we have here at Georgia Southern, what we can recruit to, and continue down that road.
And it was announced Friday that the Eagles did indeed get their man, hiring Georgia Tech quarterbacks and running backs coach Brian Cook. Cook spent the last 4 years with the Yellow Jackets. Prior to that, he was co-offensive coordinator for 4 years at Cal Poly. Georgia Tech led the nation in rushing in 2014, were top 10 in rushing this year, and led the country in yards per attempted pass.
The busiest travel days of the year will soon be here. What better way to arrive at Grandma's house, or any house, than in a beautiful new vehicle from Franklin Chevrolet in Statesboro. The new models are a feast for the eyes and as comfortable as mashed potatoes and apple pie. And comfortable is the way you feel each and every time you visit our dealership. Come in and take advantage of special holiday savings at Franklin Chevy. You'll drive home satisfied.
Well, Mike, in addition to having a chance to talk with Coach Summers, we both also had a chance to talk with Georgia Southern Athletics Director Tom Kleinlein about his decision to keep Tyson Summers and what he felt are some of Tyson Summers' strengths, which is why he kept him. Your thoughts on our discussion with Athletic Director Tom Kleinlein?
Well, I think the biggest key is continuity, and you look at some of the upperclassmen on this Georgia Southern team, they probably don't really realize the program that they're in right now. They've been through 2, if not 3 different coaches, some different schemes, whether they're on the offensive or defensive side of the ball, and that's a lot to take when you consider that these guys come to Georgia Southern as 17, 18-year-old kids on their own for the first time. All they know is football, and then you start changing up the playbook on them. It can be discouraging, especially when this year for the first time those wins aren't there. It's easy for everybody to rally around new coaches, new playbooks, when you look up and see 8, 9, and 10 wins in that win column. This year, though, it's going to be the real big hurdle to clear, and I think that there is some legitimacy to the theory of maybe you aren't quite happy with the job that Coach Summers did this year, but what are you going to do by replacing them? Maybe you appease some fans, but what's really going to make the difference next year in the on-field performance is the players on the field, not the fans off the field.
And it's rare, if not almost unprecedented, to fire a head coach after 1 year at a program. It's only really happened one time that we could come up with in recent memory, not at Georgia Southern, but just anywhere. So I think it's not unfair to keep a coach around for a couple of years and give him a chance, and that seems to be what they are doing. We had a chance to talk with Tom Kleinlein. Here's a little bit from that interview.
Everybody knows we evaluate our football program. I evaluate our football program on a weekly basis. Coach Summers and I meet throughout the entire year. And when you sit down and when you evaluate a football program, whether it's our football program or football programs I've been a part of in the past, there's a lot of things that you have to look at. Obviously, win-loss record is a big part of that. And let me start by saying that we did not perform at the level we needed to perform out on the field. That was clear. There was no question about that. But when you look at our season and how we went through the season and the number of kids that we had injured, a number of things that popped up during the year, I think that was a significant contributor to some of our win-loss factors. When Tyson took our job, there were some challenges associated with this job. Obviously, he took a very successful program, and there's a lot of pressure with our program. And we had some challenges, and we still have some challenges with things we have to manage, like our APR. Our APR is a number that we have to manage. We have to go through our processes every year in football, assuring that we're going to meet our minimum APR so that we can keep playing in bowl games. When we went through some changes early on in our football career, or our football life, so to speak, right after Jeff Monken and Willie Fritz took over, there was a significant hit to our APR, And we've had to manage that. Willie managed it successful for 2 years, and Tyson's managing it successfully right now. So I think that's a significant factor when you look at, when people ask me, well, what did you see? Being able to manage our football program through injuries, being able to manage our football program through APR constraints, being able to continue to do the things that we expect of a head coach, fundraising, the community outreach, the growth and development of our players off the field. Those are all the things that when I look at Tyson and the direction he was going, that I think are moving in the right direction. Again, clearly our on the field performance is not where it needs to be, but I feel like we can get there with his leadership. I don't know that any institution ever feels comfortable with APR because, again, the kind of the misnomer about APR is that everybody associates it with grades and academic performance, but retention is a big part of APR. So when you have student athletes who do things off the field, or you have student athletes that do things that are inappropriate, or they're not part of the culture that you want to have, and you dismiss those student athletes, which is the right decision. Let's get that out on the table. That adversely affects your APR. I've been very pleased with the academic performance of our football program. We've hit high semester high GPAs the last 2 years, and we're continuing to progress in the right ways. The challenges that Tyson faces is that sometimes, as we went through this year, and he was told this when he took the job, his roster is his roster. He cannot change his roster because of issues that he may not feel comfortable with. If a kid does something off the field and we feel like we can manage that situation, or we feel like it's something that's not a termination type situation, then we're going to have to work through it. Typically when coaches take over a program, people that don't fit the culture, head coaches walk in and go, hey, we got to find another place for you, you need to transfer, you need to do it. Couldn't do that here. That's part of managing our APR problem. We've made our APR number the last 3 consecutive years, and we're progressing to do that again this year.
All right, well, the next big announcement will be who the offensive coordinators will be. Coordinator. I know. 3, 2, 1. Well, I guess the next news we'll be waiting for out of the Georgia Southern Athletic Department, or football more in particular, will be who the next offensive coordinator will be. And as soon as we get that, we'll pass it on. Well, as for basketball, a big game this past weekend for the men as they host Florida Gulf Coast, went down to the wire. The guys seemed to be a fun team to watch. They had that game. They kept falling behind, and they came back, and I think that speaks a lot to this team, that they had a big deficit in the first half and came back, and then had a big deficit in the second half, ended up losing by 3, but I'd say the men's basketball team seems to be in a pretty good spot right now.
Right, definitely not a bad loss for the Eagles. Florida Gulf Coast are relatively new on the scene for college basketball, but they've quickly become a mid-major power. A Sweet 16 run a couple of years ago, maybe a down year after that, but they've bounced back. They're expected to be a tournament contender once again, and it definitely was flashy. Florida Gulf Coast, they go by Dunk City. They had plenty of those. Georgia Southern, they can shoot the lights out. They had plenty of runs, maybe a little iffy shot clock violation, no call there at the end that really hurt Georgia Southern, but they'll get another crack at Florida Gulf Coast. They go down there as part of a 4-game road trip. I know it seems like they just got home. You aren't reading the schedule wrong. A ton of road games during the non-conference portion of the schedule for the Eagles, but they're off on a 4-game road trip before coming home on New Year's Eve to kick off Sun Belt play.
All right, well, hopefully they can get the new year off on the right track and win some of these games on the road. As for the women, they did beat Savannah State this past week, and now they'll be getting back into tournaments and play, and then the beginning of the year be back into Sun Belt play. Well, that'll wrap things up for now. For Mike Anthony, I'm Josh Aubrey. Thanks for joining us. Hope to see you again.